move now into the next presentation. And our next presenter, he does have some PowerPoint slides that will be shared as well. And that's the Dr. Shehzad Saleem. The title of his translation is called The Qur'an Translated. And the title of his presentation is Structural Arrangement of the Qur'an. Dr. Saleem is an Islamic researcher who has a bachelor's in electrical engineering from UET Lahore, Pakistan. And he holds a Ph.D. in the history of the Qur'an from the University of Wales in the United Kingdom. Dr. Saleem studied religion under the tutelage of Javed Ahmad Ghamidi. He remained associate fellow from 1992 to 2008 and fellow from 2008 to date of Al-Mawrid. This is the Foundation for Islamic Research and Education in Pakistan. He has authored books on Islam, Qur'an, Hadith, and Character Building. He has also translated some works of famous Islamic scholars, such as Amin, Ahsan, Islahi, and Javed Ahmad Ghamidi into English. We want to welcome to the platform now our beloved brother, Dr. Saleem.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, esteemed participants. Thank you very much, Dr. Safi, and all the organizers who have made this conference possible. And I really thank all of you from the bottom of my heart that we have been able to put together this conference in a way that people from diverse backgrounds have come to share their views. My presentation, as just pointed out, does not relate to any feature vis-a-vis Quran translation. I would present my thesis or my talk on the basis of an overall understanding of the Quran vis-a-vis its structure and arrangement. So we know that the Quran is not arranged in its chronological sequence. It was revealed over a period of 22 or 23 years in a particular sequence. But later on, it was compiled in a new sequence, and the new sequence we have today, of course, being the product of Prophet Muhammad's arrangement at behest of the Almighty, should possess some hikmah, some wisdom behind it. So my talk today would be briefly refer to the research of a very famous Indian scholar, Ustaz Amin Ahsan Islahi, who has put forth and come forth with his own understanding of how the Quran is arranged. And as I shall show near the end of my talk, that his whole understanding of the arrangement of the Quran is actually based on a Quranic verse. This arrangement puts forth how he has understood the Quran, and being the word of God, being a structured word of God, the general consensus amongst Muslim scholars regarding Quran's arrangement has been that the Quran has been arranged in an order of decreasing length. So we have Surah Baqarah, one of the biggest surah of the Quran, of course, and then we have the rest of the surahs which follow it, and a very short surah with which the Quran opens. And so generally, the consensus is that the Quran has been arranged in a decreasing order, but this does not convince the inquiring mind. And there are surahs which are shorter than the previous ones. There are surahs which are longer than the previous ones. And this general principle of decreasing length does not conform. Ustaz Amin Ahsan Islahi, while reflecting on the Quran, has come up with something that I'd like to share with you in a slide as well. He has said that the Quran is actually divided into 7 distinct chapters. So these 7 chapters of the Quran, they are arranged in a way that each chapter has a theme. It has a central theme around which all the surahs of that chapter revolve. And each chapter of the Quran, it begins with a Meccan surah, one or more than one Meccan surah, and ends on one or more than one Medinan surah. So just to give you a short example, in a brief way, that as far as the arrangement of the Quran is concerned, I would just like to present before you a small slide, which I'm trying to locate. Okay, let me see. Yeah. So I think if you are able to see my screen, let me just go a little forward. Yeah. So you can see the chapterization that he has actually concluded. The first chapter starts from Surah Fatiha and ends on Surah Maida. It has the first surah, which is Meccan, and the rest of the 4 surahs are Medinan. Similarly, chapter number 2 starts off with Surah Anam and ends on Surah Tawbah. The first 2 surahs are Meccan and the last 2 are Medinan. Going on to the third chapter, we have Surah Yunus, starting from Surah Yunus, and we go right up to Surah Mu'minun, which is the 23rd surah. These are the Meccan surahs, and the only Medinan surah that we have in chapter number 3 is Surah Nur, which is the 24th surah. In chapter number 4, surahs from 25 to 32 are Meccan surahs, and Medinan surah is surah number 33. Chapter number 5, as you can see, starts off with surah number 34 and goes on to surah number 46 as the Meccan surah, and the Medinan surahs are the last 3 ones, which start on from Surah Hujurat and they Surah Muhammad and end on Surah Hujurat. Similarly, chapter number 6, you can see, starts off with Surah Kaf and ends on Surah Tahrim. We find surahs number 50, which is Surah Qaf, to Surah 56, which is Surah Waqia. These are the Meccan surahs, and the remaining are the Medinan surahs, starting from Surah Hadid and ending on Surah Tahrim. The 7th and the last chapter of the Quran has the most number of surahs. It starts off with surah number 67, which is Surah Mulk, and the Meccan surahs end on Surah Ikhlas, which is the 112th surah, and the last 2 surahs, which are Surah Falak and Nas, these are Medinan surahs. So his methodology of determining these Meccan and Medinan surahs is from within the context of the surah itself. The surah itself will tell us whether it's a Meccan surah or a Medinan surah. And as far as the Shan al-Nuzul or the rest of the ahadith are concerned, if they are consistent with the surah's own understanding of whether in the period it was revealed was Meccan or Medinan, they would be accepted. Otherwise, the Quran, from its sole self, it tells us that it is a Meccan surah. Then any narrative which is to the contrary would be politely written or not accepted. So here is this scheme in a more compact way. The green, you can see, represents the Meccan Quran or the Meccan surahs, and the yellow represents the Medinan surahs. And you can see that almost 2/3 of the Quran was revealed in Mecca, and 1/3 of the Quran was revealed in Medina. And as far as these Meccan surahs are concerned, you'll find that their basic addressees are the idolaters who lived in Mecca mostly. And as far as the Medinan surahs are concerned, their addressees are the people of the book who mostly resided in Medina. And you can see that as far as the names of the surah are concerned, the next slide will tell you, replacing every number by the surah name. And this is how the Quran has been arranged in a structural way. And this structural way of the Quran also converges onto its theme. And as you can see in chapter number 2, Surah Tawbah, which is the 9th surah of the Quran, this is the convergence or the pinnacle of the Quran or the climax of the Quran, and I shall just explain it presently before I just go on and complete this scheme. So as I just said, that each chapter of the Quran will begin with one or more Meccan surah and end on one or more Medinan surah. So this is the first feature of that arrangement. The second feature of that arrangement is, or this whole arrangement is, that within each chapter, the sequence of the surahs is chronological, it is historical. So the surah which will be revealed first which is placed first will always be revealed first as well. So for example, in the first chapter, we have Surah Baqarah being placed before Surah Al Imran. So Baqarah would have been revealed before Ali Imran. So every surah within a chapter, the sequence is historical, it's just chronological. And this also shows how the theme and the mood of the chapter progresses. And then each chapter discusses some aspect of the overall theme of the Quran by delineating some phases of the warning delivered by Prophet Muhammad to his addressees. So each of these chapters, as I said, these are 7 chapters, and all these 7 chapters, they are distinct in a way that they, in some form or the other, they deliver the warning from the Prophet. And of course, this warning is divided into various phases. I mean, initially in Mecca, his warning was confined to his own family, to his own tribe, and gradually it expanded to the rest of the Quraysh and to the people. And of course, it came to a certain pinnacle. And at this juncture, when he had delivered the truth to the ultimate extent, which in the Quranic words used for that are Itmam al-Hujjah, it is here that after this that he migrated, and the rest of the phases of his preaching mission continued in Medina. And as I said earlier on, in Medina, his addressees were the people of the book mostly, to whom he delivered the truth. Another aspect of this whole arrangement is that each chapter has its own theme, as I said, and these themes are all that we can understand as far as we take these chapters individually. As far as the sequence of the chapters is concerned, of course, that is another very important thing that we need to understand, and that can be understood from this sequence, from this chart that you can see. That chapter 2, as I pointed out, is the pinnacle of the Quran. It is like the climax of the Quran. It is here that the Quran reaches its climax. We know generally that in books that we produce as human beings, the pinnacle generally, or the climax generally, arrives near the end of the book that we might author. But here in the Quran, it is that the first 2 chapters, they are, as far as they are concerned, they primarily address the people of the book. So starting off with chapter number 1, we'll find that the addressees are the people of the book. But from chapter number 7 to chapter number 2, if you take it in the reverse order, the addressees in the Meccan surahs are generally the people of the book. And of course, as far as the pinnacle is concerned, in this chapter number 2, right at the top of chapter number 2, the surah on which chapter number 2 finishes is Surah Tawbah. So it is here that the mission of the Prophet gets completed, because you see, the surah is divided into a judgment that was pronounced on the idolaters, which were the mushrikun. The first part of the surah deals with the mushrikun. About them, the Almighty had said that if they persist in their denial, they have to be put to death unless they accept faith. The second part of the surah, of course, deals with the people of the book. Regarding them, the judgment that was pronounced was that they would be they would remain subservient to the Muslim rulers by the imposition of jizya. And as far as the hypocrites are concerned, which is the rest of the surah, judgment about them was also given, that if they persist in their evil ways, they will be juxtaposed with the idolaters. So this was the judgment that was delivered in the times of Prophet Muhammad. And the warning that was given was that if people intentionally deny the truth in this world, they will be punished in this world. And this punishment, of course, relates to the immediate and the direct and the foremost addressees of a messenger of God. The last time this took place was in Prophet Muhammad's times, but once the Prophet Muhammad has departed, of course, today no longer this judgment is going to take place. The final judgment is now going to take place on the Day of Judgment. But the Quran has been arranged in this sequence that as far as these chapters are concerned, they deliver this prophetic mission in a way that you can see that it has been encapsulated. It has been encapsulated in these 7 chapters, so that if we go through these 7 chapters, we'll realize how the Prophet fulfilled his mission and how he had actually been given this task of reminding people towards the truth. And if they don't accept the truth and intentionally deny the truth, then they would be rewarded or punished in this world. But this actually is a law that relates to the prophetic period only. And finally, as I said, this prophetic law, I mean, this law is something which is confined to the prophetic period, and therefore, once the prophetic period has been done away with the departure of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we are living in this post-prophetic era in which judgments would not take place. They have been deferred to the Day of Judgment, but we can draw a lesson from the judgments that have taken place in the era of God's messengers. So this structural arrangement of the Quran, I know it's in a very brief time, it's not difficult, it's not possible to go into all the details, but my last point here would be that this structural arrangement of the Quran which I just presented. And of course, I would be ready to answer any questions and present some more material as well. But as I said earlier on, that Ustaz Amin Islahi is the person who has presented this hikmah behind the arrangement of the Quran. And he actually says that as far as the Quran itself is concerned, it endorses this arrangement when it says in Surah Hijr, وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَاكَ سَبْعًا مِّنَ الْمَثَانِي وَالْقُرْآنِ الْعَظِيمِ. So I'm just going to comment on the translation that he has done, and also then see that how it has been generally translated. So his translation is that, Prophet, we have given you the 7 Mathani, which is the great Quran. So the word Mathani is the plural of the Arabic word Mathna. And the word Mathna, as you all know, it means to occur in pairs. So the word Mathani would mean that something which occurs in pairs. So 7 Masani, which is the great Quran, would mean that they are something which consists of pairs, and is in the form of 7, in a conglomeration of 7. So the meaning that he derives from this is that the Quran is actually based on these 7 chapters, and in each chapter the surahs occur in pair. So Sab'a min al-Masani would mean 7 chapters in which the surahs within that chapter occur in pairs. So all of the surahs in each of the chapter, they occur in pairs. So just to give you an example, Surah Baqarah is a pair of Surah Al Imran. Both begin with the letters Alif Lam Mim. Surah Maida and Surah Nisa, which is the 4th and 5th surah, they occur in pairs. So except for Surah Fatiha and possibly some other surahs, many of the Quran, or most of the Quranic surahs, they occur in pair within a chapter. And the Sabah here, the 7 here, actually does not refer to Surah Fatiha, as I just presently make this point later on. That refers to those 7 chapters. So what effectively the Quran is telling the Prophet is that, O Prophet, we have given you these 7 chapters, and within these chapters, the surahs, they occur in pairs. Of course, now the general understanding of this verse is that it refers to Surah Fatiha, because there is a hadith which I have just quoted from Bukhari right below this Quranic verse, and it says that Ummul Quran hiya sabul masani wal Quranul Azim. So Ummul Quran, we know, is Surah Fatiha, and of course that would mean that the Prophet himself is telling us that Asabul Masani refers to the Surah Fatiha. So the question arises that if Ustaz Amin Islahi says that Sabam al Masani relates to 7 chapters, such that within each chapter the surahs occur in pairs, so how can this be true when this verse is generally not understood in this meaning? So before I comment on that, I'll just like to point this out. This is my last point. That the last thing that we are going to present here is Sabam al Masani refers to, generally the translation is the 7 most repeated ones. So first of all, the word masna does not mean repeated ones. It means something which occurs in pairs. And similarly, Surah Fatiha does not have 7 verses. It has 6 verses. I mean, unless you include Surah Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, or you break up the last verse into 2. So this would not be a correct interpretation. The correct interpretation would be something which is in pairs and not repeated. And as far as this narrative is concerned, of course, it does refer to Surah Fatiha as well, because Surah Fatiha is an embodiment of the teachings of the Quran, and therefore it has been called Sabal Masani. And the word Sabal Masani, of course, here refers to the fact that it is composed of 7 chapters, such that each chapter has 2 pairs, has a surahs which occur in pairs. So this is my brief presentation. I have tried to be brief. I think I have tried to oversimplify certain things as well. I will be glad to answer questions, but the basic purpose is that the hikmah in the arrangement of the Quran needs to be revisited, and it's not just surahs of decreasing length that have been arranged. The Quran has structurally arranged in 7 chapters in the way that I've just endeavored to put forth, and it makes a lot of meaningful reading vis-a-vis the mission of the Prophet and vis-a-vis the ministry that he delivered. So thank you very much, and I would be available for any questions.